Welcome to We Virginians, a conversation about public policy in the Commonwealth. My name is Marisa Porto. I'm a longtime news editor and publisher in Virginia. Our topic today is education in the Commonwealth from pre-K to high school and where we're going in the fall. And today we have joining us Delegate Martha Mugler, who is a former school board member in the city of Hampton and now is a delegate for the 91st district, which includes Hampton, York, parts of York County, and also parts of Poquoson, the city of Poquoson. We also have Delegate John Avoli, who represents the 20th district, including Highland County and part of the counties of Augusta and Nelson, which includes the cities of Staunton and Waynesboro. So welcome. We're glad to have you today.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Good to have you. So let's get started. It turns out it's a good time for this conversation because there is a 134-page document about how we should all return to school in the fall that the governor's office shared with us. So it includes some direction about how to go back to our classrooms, social distancing, facial coverings. It includes all kinds of stuff about healthcare screenings, and the students went out for, well, by the time they go back, I would say it's probably in the 9-month mark, and through the summer, and haven't actually been in a classroom. So can you tell us, and we'll start with Delegate Mugler, if you can tell us a little bit about what you think of the plan and how you think it has been received, that would be great.
Sure. I think that the plan is very comprehensive from first glance anyway, all 134 pages. And I think, you know, they've tried to capture all the things that they think may come up. I think that it's been a nice collaboration of a lot of stakeholders, including Virginia Department of Health and using CDC guidelines to sort of guide the work that we'll be able to do in the education setting. And so from first glance, I think it's very comprehensive. I think as we move forward into actually putting it into place, there'll be new and different questions that arise every day with every different component of what is proposed. But I think that they've taken a really hard look at kind of the experiences that we've had as a Commonwealth throughout our schools, and tried to learn from the experiences that we've had during the during this COVID-19 epidemic. And so I think that's going to be helpful in terms of how it is rolled out. We've kind of tried some of the parts of it already, if you will, in terms of what was done with online learning. And so I think, bringing all those groups together, the health components and all the folks in education, there have been superintendents and teachers and parents and lots of stakeholders that have weighed in on the plan. So I believe it's very comprehensive. I believe it's going to be challenging for the school divisions as we move forward, because there are a lot of different issues specifically related to transportation that are going to be very complex in terms of rolling them out in the various school divisions, especially larger ones. But I think the same will ring true for our smaller school divisions in terms of having enough buses and how we're going to tier the transportation, and just how we're going to tier all those schedules. And I can talk more about that as our conversation goes on today. But I think the plan is comprehensive. Delegate Avoli, what do you think? He's a former principal, so he's lived this and breathed it.
Martha, you did an excellent job in summarizing what the comprehensive plan is. I always put myself, and thank God I'm a retired a recovering principal now. I'm not still working in the environment. Things have changed, and I always put myself in a position of a school administrator now, and trying to implement the plan. I see myself in a high school. Things have changed. How you greet kids, how you meet people, parents and teachers, and a component of getting people back and forth. Middle school becomes a little more complex. Elementary, I'm scratching my head. My wife was a retired elementary school teacher and said, oh my God, how do we implement this? At the other end, what choices do we have? We've been in school now for 9 months. We've never had something like this before. And all of a sudden, we're confronted with all of these logistics that we have to implement. And a lot of these are going to require money, additional monies. And where this money going to come from to deal with transportation? The plight of special needs kids is a real concern of mine. We're looking at these kids maybe coming into the building here. And then we look at the other side of it, the career and technical ed. When you're dealing with mechanics, you're dealing with welders, you're dealing with the logistics of the whole operation in terms of how we do what we do, and getting in our time for certification is even going to be a greater challenge.
Just listening to you talk makes my head spin a little bit. Can you tell me what are, and I'm just going to ask you, Delegate Avoli, if you wouldn't mind, because you were a principal, what are you doing? What are schools doing right now to prepare for this with this 134-page document? It just feels overwhelming.
Yeah, our local schools here have been in a planning process for quite some time, and the plan has also been based on anticipation. Now that we have a document, it's going to be a little bit easier. The question is now getting this document really fine-lined and fine-tuned so we can begin the implementation of it when the first day of school comes. But again, plans are plans, but implementing the plans and logistics of it remains to be seen. We still have in our district here a couple of school divisions that are under construction. I know Waynesboro High School, hopefully will be finished. Our Stanton High School, basically a massive renovation of it should be completed. The transportation component of it is the logistical thing for me. This district, the 20th, and I speak of my district now, is a huge landmass. It begins on the border of West Virginia up in Highland County, and it goes all the way to Nelson County. 85,000 people, a little bit smaller than the state of Rhode Island. You know, my kids are on the bus an hour and a half sometimes. And how do we move these people back and forth on alternate days now, half days, and then arrangement, think of the logistics for the parents now, not so much for the school. When I have them here, I have them. How do we get them home? The babysitting, just services that are required for the smaller children, not so much the high school kids. So logistics, and implementation is going to be quite a challenge. But like I said, we have no other choice. What do we do? We can't keep these kids at home.
Right. So, Delegate Mugler, Delegate Avoli has a completely different sort of perspective on it from your perspective. You've got a little bit more of, I guess, sort of metro area. What is there anything unusual or different in? He was talking about the long time frames that students are on the bus based on the counties and the areas that people live in, that students live in there. What about your area of the state? Is there anything unique to putting the plan to get into action?
Right. Well, I think, the transportation aspect, we keep coming back to that, but it is very complex. And I do think what's happening in a rural district like Delegate Avoli's is quite different from what we have happening here in the 91st district, although, the 91st district is made up of a really diverse set of very different communities between Hampton, Poquoson, and York County. And York County is, probably got some similar transportation issues that Delegate Avoli is experiencing. Hampton is definitely much more compact, as well as Poquoson, but we're using all yellow bus fleets. You have a specific number of buses available to transport those students. So, it's definitely going to require, and we have a really terrific transportation expert in Hampton, but it's going to require tiered transportation. You know, there's going to have to be an AM and a PM transportation option. And so I think, we're looking right now in terms of the plan where right now all pre-K through 3 will be in person, right? And I think most communities will probably try to do pre-K through 5 in person because that's sort of that whole elementary level, but it remains to be seen how each individual school division decides, what their plan is going to look like and what's going to work for them. And then you have high schools and middle schools that are going to have to do the same kind of tiered transportation. So your buses are going to be on the road all day long, probably. But I think we're definitely looking at least in an urban community like Hampton, we're looking at the probability of an AM and PM delivery system of students and probably a staggering of the schedules, particularly in middle and high school. So for example, they may go on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday one week, and their peers are going on Tuesday, Thursday, and then the following week they'll flip it. And again, with the staggered drive times. So I think they're going to be, things are going to look very different. But there's all the social distancing requirements that, are going to require really small classroom spaces and, small student-to-teacher ratios. So in order to accommodate that, you're going to have to bring them in small batches.
Well, that brings us to a really good question, which is, let's assume I'm a parent and I have a couple of different school children in my home, and they are of various ages, and their schedules are different schedules. Has there been any discussion around that particular issue for parents in the Commonwealth? And maybe we'll ask, since you've been a principal before, Delegate Avoli, if you wouldn't mind tackling that one first.
I'm not aware of any discussion with that unless Martha has some. I know there are many after-school programs and day school programs, but the question at this point is, if you were to try to provide some kind of daycare on alternate days, where do you hold these programs? And again, dealing with social distancing and volunteers and people to work is going to be another difficult situation. Now, another real unique thing here, again, when we talk about these schedules and daycare and watching and taking care of children, when you're on buses, the length of time that I'm referring to, daylight savings time is a real hazard here. I've got kids that get on the bus at dark and they get home and it's dark again. If we begin to extend the school day on these alterations here, the worst nightmare that any parent can have is to have a child get off the school bus in the dark and have to go on a bus when it's dark still in the morning. Those are real problematic issues. Coming to daycare, Martha, I'm not aware of anything, what school divisions are doing and who's going to pay for it. Obviously, it's going to require additional staff. I would welcome your insight on that if you have any.
Well, I know that, the plan does talk about that a little bit in terms of, there being emergency childcare available. Obviously, many teachers happen to be parents of young children themselves. So we've got to make sure that our staffs have childcare so that they can come to work and teach the kids. That's going to be an interesting and important component. So there is an aspect of that they're looking at. But I think what they've tried to do with this plan is keep the one thing, and that's education pre-K through 12. And we know that these other pieces are going to need to fall into place with respect to adequate and satisfactory childcare. In a community like Hampton, for example, our Parks and Recreation has a childcare program that they offer in the schools. And but there are still modifications that are going to have to be made to those with respect to how many children can be in the particular spaces. So, I think by phase 3, we're going to be looking at groups of 50, but will that apply to the childcare circumstance or not? Because we're looking at smaller class sizes that are not in that 50 range. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like, although I know that we have to be sure that that piece is in place as well. And I know that they are looking at it, and that, you know, we see that as a Commonwealth as an emergency. And really it's an emergency not just for education staffers, but, you know, across the entire Commonwealth. We need to get people back to work. And so childcare is going to be critical and important. I mean, I know, you know, I raised 3 children, and, you know, childcare was always a huge consideration and an enormous expense in a lot of cases. So, you know, if you got to get to work, and you want to know you have good and reliable and safe childcare as well. So we're going to have to bring that back into play, but you know, it's going to look different.
Martha, I'm hoping, and just a thought here, although these plans have been set out, I hope there is extreme flexibility in them, because every school division may be creative, and we learn from best practices we can share. Something better may come of this. Who in the world knows? But I hope we're not so rigid that we're saying this is the way it's got to be done. As long as we're doing the objective of keeping kids safe, staff safe, personnel safe, the flexibility, I hope, is there. The other big concern I have, I think the elementary, and you heard me say this before, Martha, the elementary school kids are easier to control. Social distancing, when it gets to that middle school and all those hormones are going crazy, and then you get to the high school, my God, it's going to be a difficult thing to do from that perspective. Maybe in a classroom, once in between class, cafeteria and events and that type of thing is going to be, I think, a real monumental task.
Well, speaking of you know, the issues that are facing the schools, talk about maybe if you could talk a little bit about youth sports. You mentioned after school care, but there are also after school programs, you know, band and those such programs that these students are coming back to. I mean, how does that work in the fall?
Martha, you want to go first?
Either one of you can jump in.
I'm not an expert on this, because you probably have some, you know, Virginia High School League experience.
Yeah.
But you know, I'll talk a little bit about it. You know, in the governor's press conference on Tuesday, his chief of staff talked quite a bit about youth sports and intentional interaction versus incidental. And so, you know, I think they're looking at the different sports and the different components of each of those sports, and how obviously football has intentional contact, but that there are some other sports that have more incidental contact. And so I think they'll probably phase those sports in that kind of way, by looking at those aspects to the sports. And, you know, right now I think they're allowing some conditioning to take place in high schools anyway, in terms of, you know, keeping that social distance in place. And I think social distancing is what they're going to be looking at with recreational sports as well. And I think, you know, it's going to be one of those things that's going to roll out a little bit at a time, in terms of, you know, how many people are in the stands, and all those things. And right now it's looking like they want just parents in the stands, and then maybe by phase 3 they'll start allowing more numbers of folks in. But I think we'll be looking at, you know, sports like soccer and potentially baseball and things of that sort, where there's not intentional contact. And then there's also been some talk where they are looking closely at shared equipment like helmets and things of that sort. So there are going to be obviously some rules around using the same helmet and that kind of thing. I think people are going to be expected to have their own helmets, their own pads and that sort of thing that's individual. So, everything, things are going to look very different. And I think that even the stands that people spectate from are going to look differently.
Yeah.
So you both mentioned it a little bit here and there, but let's talk about there'll be more people needed. It sounds like for school bus driver and maybe after school care, because you're running essentially a much longer school day. There's some potential for new equipment in all of this. Where does the money come from for the expenses for this? And when you see it already around the Commonwealth, city governments and county governments are feeling stretched from a revenue standpoint, and that school budget comes from those government agencies.
Yeah, Marisa, in my previous life, not only was I a high school principal, I was also the mayor of the city of Stanton for a considerable amount of time in local government. And I can tell you, I'm sure it's statewide. These local governments have been devastated as far as revenues from sales tax, obviously, and meals, lodging, all aspects of taxation that comes in. So the big hit's going to come from local taxation here, but the only thing you have left is property tax, real estate tax. I saw the revenue report today, Martha. I don't know if you got your copy or not. It doesn't look very good, depending on what happened back here in April. So I am sure that at some time, and I don't know when, sometime in July, maybe August, there's going to have to be a readjustment in the budget. And the good part about it is I voted for the budget. It wasn't a perfect budget, but having done 16 of them at local government, there's no such thing as a perfect budget. But my initiatives that I supported were all there: early childhood education, career and technical, all of those components were there. And I'm afraid right now that this budget is going to get nailed, Martha. I don't know as explicit as I can say it. And I don't know where the money's going to come from. We have a balanced budget amendment in Virginia, so we can't print like the federal government does, and it is what it is. You got what you got.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. But I think you spoke to needing more staffing and things of that sort. I think definitely in terms of childcare, you're going to need more staffing. As it comes to transportation, I'm not sure. We may have a bus driver that's driving 6 shifts, all day long, or splitting them up, and so because you still have a finite number of buses, so. Yeah. We're not going to be able to double the buses that we have. So, I'm sure that they're going to probably up staffs in transportation because, people will be tired and things of that. So you've got to be careful and safe. But I'm not sure that we're necessarily going to see the need for more drivers in a huge way anyway, because we just have but so many vehicles to put on the road and drive. As far as the teaching staff is considered, I think we'll probably see school divisions keeping their numbers pretty close to what they are. We're talking about a staggered schedule. So I would imagine what we'll see is that they're going to be teaching the course in the morning and in the afternoon, or they're going to be teaching the course on Monday and Tuesday, and then Wednesday and Thursday they'll teach it to the same group. So I think it's going to require a lot of creativity. And we did, the governor just announced that there was funding provided by, the governor's emergency education relief fund that we got, but that money is tagged toward COVID expenses. So it's really almost directed toward a lot of money that's already been spent or that needs to be spent to bring things up to code in terms of online learning and expanding our bandwidth in communities in the southwest part of Virginia that don't have the bandwidth that we have down in this part of Virginia. And so I think that we're going to see some funding go to those kinds of things. We're going to probably see a lot of that funding go toward technology and equipment, computers and laptops for students in school divisions that don't already have electronic means available to their students. And we're lucky in a community like Hampton that already had launched a one-to-one technology initiative much earlier on, and I think it was 2011, so they were sort of ahead of the curve. But then we have a community in my district, Pocosin, did not have that kind of equipment in place, and so they had to, really ramp up and get the equipment and train and get it to their students. So I think a lot of that money is going to go to those kinds of efforts. So it's already pretty specific in terms of where that funding is going to go. And Delegate Avoli, you're right. The budget that we passed in March wasn't perfect, but it was a darn nice budget, if I say so myself. And then it was like within a week, we were knowing that wasn't going to be the reality when we start July 1. And so, they'll be reforecasting. The administration will have to reforecast all our numbers, and we'll do a reconvene on the budget in August. I think they'll take probably much of July to get the numbers. Now, there is one thing that the Secretary of Finance said today in the press conference that was a little bit hopeful in terms of the our numbers are 20% off from what they were this time last year with sales tax and so forth, but we have not collected tax that we normally would have collected in May, so that'll come in June. So there may be a little bit more offset to that if June levels off economically as we ease back into opening the economy. So I'm hopeful. I served on the school board from 2008 until I was elected to the House of Delegates. And of course, 2009 was, really a tough financial year. And we really spent about 4 years where we were doing nothing but trimming the budget to the bone. So I've been there. And I've sweated the tough stuff, and we may be in a position where we're going to be making some difficult decisions. I'm hopeful that, we'll preserve as much as possible in the education realm, because I too share those same values with Delegate Avoli in terms of, early childhood education and vocational and technical education and those opportunities that are so important. We both sit on the education committee, so we really share those values. So you can best believe that we'll be up there speaking up for the education dollars to make sure that we're looking out for our young people in the Commonwealth.
I think too, Martha, as we look at some of the initiatives that were passed in the education, we had a lot of them. And a lot of them are good, but it may be that we defer some of these for a period of time, for 1 year, and put the money where the rubber meets the road. I mean, these are nice things to have, but necessity is life now as we look at this component that we call education, what we do with kids. We need to have staff, we need to have reading, writing, you know what I'm talking about, all of the good things that we talk about. And some of these nice things that we dealt with maybe need to be delayed for 6 months or a year, and then look at them and see where they are at that point and put that money in the core curriculum that we're dealing with.
Right.
I think that part of it's important. Also, so much concern is in our areas, I'm sure everywhere else, the impact of our restaurants, our hotels, towards it being closed, the effect that it has had on local governments in terms of meals and lodging tax has been terrible. I know the city of Stanton here, the whole community, Nelson County with the wineries and all, it's been tough. It's been extremely tough and slow to go, as well as Waynesboro with the theaters and these type of wonderful things. My little Highland County, one of the most beautiful places in the world. We canceled the Sugar Maple Festival. because of this. And now the other big event that we have is the fair, which is, in autumn. It may not happen. It's just a tough situation right now. Who would have thought, Martha, that would you have done this 2 years ago if you'd have known this was going to happen?
Who knew? If we had a crystal ball, there are a lot of things we wouldn't
Oh
do,
my
right?
God.
Right.
What a year.
Well, I guess one of the questions I have for you is, we've gone over a lot of the issues that will be facing the school systems in the fall. I guess, what do you tell parents and staff and teachers who are going to find themselves in that place where they're going to have to go back or send a child back to a place where, we're still trying to figure it out. We've got a 134-page document that gives us directions, but we're still trying to figure it out. And with some students, especially the younger ones where you have to, you're hugging and touching and, playing with each other is really sort of inherent in their daily lives. And when they have to keep them from doing what is natural to them when they're being around other students. What do you say to parents who have to send their children back about safety and health? Well, and the specter of something could happen, and then, how many children folks have to stay home and distance themselves for, 2 weeks while they figure out if this is a hot spot or not. What do you say to those?
It's a new world. That's what I've told everyone. I have 2 daughters that are teachers now, and one's here at Stanton High School. And of course, what do we do? I mean, we don't have the answers at this point, but I really believe that a lot of parents are anxious to get their kids back at school. It's new. It's something that we're going to have to try. And any plan that you have, logistics are the problem. And I do know, and I fundamentally believe, having been there, that the best organizers in the world of children, as well as middle school and high school, are teachers. They deal with them every day. So I hope we listen to them, we understand, and have flexibility in the plan to implement it.
Do you like to add, Delegate Mugler?
I just think Delegate Avoli is right. I mean, we're in different times. It's just completely unprecedented. And, none of us have lived through a pandemic. And so it is going to be a matter of, we have instructions on how to get this done, but it's really going to be a matter of kind of working through it. We're all in this together. We're all, working towards a common goal, and we all want to make sure to get children back in school, and we want to make sure that we're educating our children for the future. So I think by and large, parents, from what I read on Facebook anyway, want to get their children back in school.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people are enjoying this opportunity and really soaking it in and making the best of it. But I think it's definitely a newfound respect for our teachers and educators, no doubt about that. But, I'm sure there are going to be families and parents that are a little nervous about putting their children back on a school bus and putting them back into a public school setting, because, we've been upended as a society in this country and in this Commonwealth. And so I think we're all a little apprehensive about, putting ourselves back out there. And the media has, certainly had us all on our toes in terms of, what's going on out there with the infection and its transmission and how easily it's transmitted. And, school settings are no exception. And so I think things are going to look a lot different. There has been talk in the document that we've referred to a lot today about, some of those congregate setting areas like the cafeterias and the auditoriums and so forth that may not be used for a little while.
Yeah.
And, a lot of talk about, even singing and how the droplets come out in singing. So we may see some revisions in our curriculum with respect to things like that. It's going to be different, but I think, the safety and welfare of our young children is paramountly important to our educational system in Virginia. And so, I think it's a matter of trust. We have to put trust in the institution. And as I say, we're all in this together. We're going to come out on the other side of this, but it's definitely different from any time ever before.
You know, the thought of just what happened with the travel industry, and I do travel a lot. And prior to 911, I remember going 10 minutes before the flight, getting on board and going. Look at what's happened there.
Sure.
I think we're in a different world today, but like Martha, I can say this, that I think the people in the education world are smart, they're creative, and anytime you have a kind of downturn of this nature here, something bad that we're looking about, something good will come out of it. And with the technology that we have today, we may recreate how we deliver instruction to kids. As the STEM program curriculum did that for one of the best curriculum activities we ever had, I think out of this, we're going to become a stronger educational component here in the United States and in Virginia, because people are creative. It may not be in the classroom all the time. It may be your teleeducation that you're dealing with. I know in some of our rural environments that we have right now where you can't have a physics class, it's coming out of the community college via a computer. So this may be the new trend that we're looking at coming and delivering education now. And the world of work is going to have the same situation with telecommuting and people staying at home, working at home. So it's going to be a whole new ball game. And experimentally, we're going to have to experiment with the class of 2021.
Right.
So that's where we are.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I appreciate both of you coming on and sharing your thoughts and insights. We will sure have you back again as you know more about what your local organizations will be doing. And but I do want to thank you. I know you've been working overtime trying to figure this out for your communities, and we thank you for that. So
Very good.
Absolutely. Well, it's great being with you today. Thank you for thinking of us. And
Yeah.
I want to thank all our viewers for watching. If you've made it this far, we appreciate you liking the video and maybe sharing and subscribing to the channel. More conversations are coming with We Virginians, and we'll see you next time. And thank you to all of the teachers out there who are watching.
Very good.
We really appreciate it.